Ahoy! Welcome to the Writer Talks. I'm not sure how many of you think that we humans are the superior species of this earth. There are far too many instances and studies to indicate the prowess, beauty, and adaptability of several other species. Anyway, this could spiral into a vehement debate, but thankfully there are several creative minds who are able to see this and even accept it and create scenarios, at times humorous ones, wherein this proverbial pecking order is reversed. My guest today, Susie Kearley from the UK, is a photographer, versatile writer, adept at fiction and non-fiction, and she has done precisely this. In her latest work, published just last month, The Guinea Pigs Guide to Training Humans, right from the credits in the book to the narration, there is a curious and grappling role reversal wherein Charlie, the pig, provides tips to train humans at their adoptive home. He through Kearley insists that this is an essential reading for all guinea pigs, replete with wit, sarcasm, brilliant illustrations, and a compelling style. In the first page itself, Charlie observes, referring to humans as, I quote, strange creatures making odd sounds and gestures, or he's advising that humans are a reliable source of food and their presence must be tolerated. I was hooked from the start. In fact, you will find my review, Humbling Humans Through Humour, wherein I have obviously rated it 5-star. Susie's debut novel, Pestilence, that was 10 years in the writing, is again starkly reminiscent of the pandemic and was published early this year, and it has been doing extremely well. Besides this, Susie has authored 9 non-fiction books that includes travel writing, publications on freelance writing, her interviews with Druids, chronicled in Pagan Journeys, and a collection of interviews with World War II victims and witnesses. After a checkered career in marketing and admin, she has been a freelance writer writing voraciously on several topics as diverse as food, nutrition, psychology, travel, and the like. She has an eye for detail and a sense of timing that is obvious in her stunning photographs as it is in her writing. So let's dive in and listen to this charming writer-photographer speak about her creative journey. We actually begin our interview by discussing her photographs. But before that, please like, share, and subscribe to the Writer Talk so that we can continue such rewarding literary engagements with brilliant writers from across the world. I do hope you enjoy watching me talk to this talented, prolific writer-photographer from the UK, Susie Kearley. So, until next week, smile, act on that passion, persevere, and live your dreams. Ahoy! Ahoy! Welcome to the Writer Talks. With me is Susie Kearley from the United Kingdom. Hello, Susie.
Hello.
Great to see you. How are you doing today, and how did you start the day?
Oh, I'm all right. I've been writing about wind farms and Halloween.
Oh, wow. So something that is endemic to Europe, wind farms, and then something that is so US based American, right? Halloween.
Yes.
Lovely. Interesting mix. And congratulations on your debut novel, Pestilence, doing so well.
Yes, thank you.
Now, you're a writer, photographer, you work for magazines, both UK-based, US-based, and you cover a wide range of subjects from military stories to the paranormal, plus health and nutrition. You're a qualified nutritionist yourself. You also are a travel writer, you write for travel magazines. I mean, that's some splendid versatility. When did you discover your love for writing?
Well, I always fancied being a writer. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to like books, and I liked the idea of being a novelist, but I wasn't allowed to do that sort of when I left school, so I had to get a proper job. So that was kind of, it was when I left school that I started penning the novel Pestilence that I published recently. So it's been on the on the shelf for a very long time. Undergoing various stages of editing, and I did have aspirations at one point to get into journalism as well, but I couldn't get a job in the local paper, and So I just ended up doing what I could get a job in, which was just office admin, which was like my worst nightmare, actually. It wasn't what I wanted to do at all, but it was what someone would, let me do. And my career, kind of went off in the direction of marketing from there, because that was the closest thing that I could get to being a writer in proper employment at the time. So for 20 years, I sort of worked in sort of admin and marketing roles. But I always wanted to be a writer, really, from a young age. And it was just that, work aspirations, I couldn't get a foot in the door.
Right, I can imagine. All right, now let's begin by taking a look at some of the brilliant pictures that you have taken as a photographer, and perhaps you could talk a little bit about 3 or 4 of these pictures. I took them all from your website, so
yeah, okay.
And I found them absolutely brilliant. So shall we just take a look at some of these pictures? Right, so here's the first one, I think. Yes. Just sharing the screen. All right, so yeah, I think
that was I think that's a bald eagle.
Yeah,
anyway, it's a flying display at I think it's at Whipsnade Wildlife Park, where they have birds of prey flying displays, where they have the bird handler come out and the birds fly around and they give them food as a reward, and they take them back in. So anyway, this is one of the birds that was on display.
When did you take this? This must have been really. I mean, it's all in the moment, isn't it? You've got a perfect angle, so to say.
Yes. Well, I put it on the sport setting for this kind of, when things are moving quickly, I'll put it on the sport setting for quick photography and just shoot lots of pictures. And then some of them come out okay and some of them miss altogether. So that was one of the better ones.
Lovely. So how about this one? Whenever I think, for me personally, whenever I think of England, I think of such idyllic places, and then this is such a postcard picture. Where is this, and when did you take this?
That's a National Trust property that we went to when we were on holidays. That would have been one of my travel articles. It's the National Trust looks after historic houses and properties and castles, and this was just an old farmhouse which I think dated back to Tudor times, reign of King Henry VIII. Okay. So you step back inside, and it's like going back in time to to see how they lived sort of 500 odd years ago.
Lovely.
And it was very nice, very pretty.
Very pretty, isn't it?
It didn't take very long to go around. I can't remember what it's
called. This is marvelous. I mean, how did you manage this? It's all about timing.
Yeah, this was an air display, and I went to a few of them. One was at Eastbourne, and one was at I can't think, a place in Somerset. And I think this was probably the Somerset one, just because the sun was on the plains, whereas I think at Eastbourne I was taking it into the sun a bit more. So this was just, I had it on sport setting for a quick shutter speed, and I was taking lots of pictures, and I saw these two planes coming at each other and went click, just as they were sort of like here, and by the time the shutter went down, they were just passing. But it's not always easy to get the right moment, but that was the right moment.
Yeah, this is on target, on this. Yeah, amazing. And okay, let's talk about this. Where was this? And is that some kind of a fest?
Yeah, this is the Bristol Balloon Festival. We went there when I was doing a story for Caravan magazine about caravanning in Bristol during the festival season. and this was the nighttime. I can't think what they called them now, but sort of nighttime illuminations when the balloons all went into the sky with their glowing fires. And then it was very pretty, and it was with music. So the bit that you can see there, because some of them have got the fires on and some of them haven't, and the fires were actually lit up to music, and so they'd go boom boom, and then the lights would go light. So it was all kind of choreographed.
That's beautiful. Fantastic. Thank you so much for that. We'll continue talking. We'll continue talking. I absolutely love the pictures. I think it's brilliant, totally stunning. And thank you so much for those pictures.
That's right.
So, we'll move into dive into this first segment. It is called the rapid response segment. All right. And what happens in this segment is that I will ask you a series of questions, maybe about 6 questions. So automatically, you cannot sit and ponder over the questions. You will have to instinctively, quickly pick up one of the choices, right, from the options that I give you.
And, so not all of them. Okay.
Yeah, and briefly explain your choices. Is that okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Great. So here's the first question. Now, between a guinea pig and a rabbit, if you were allowed to keep either one of the two as pets or companions, which one would you choose and why?
Well, I'll go for that one because the guinea pigs, we actually do keep guinea pigs. And I'm allowed to keep guinea pigs because they're small and my husband likes them and they're easy to house. We did consider having rabbits, but they're quite big and they need quite big accommodation to really enable them to live life properly as they should. You know, to be able to bounce around and run around. And it's just a space issue, really. And also, because my husband's allergic to small furry pets, I was only allowed something small. So again, the guinea pigs are smaller and less likely to upset his sensitive respiratory system. So we do have guinea pigs, and I've written a book about my guinea pigs.
Exactly. That's the reason why I put in the question, and I absolutely love that book. I found it, totally compelling, and it's such a compelling read. Now, here's the second question: if you had to opt for your book either being a bestseller or a classic, which one would you opt for it to be? A classic or a bestseller?
I'd like it to be a bestseller, and if it's a bestseller, it might become a classic. But I mean, once I'm dead, doesn't really matter, does it? If it's a bestseller, I can appreciate the moment while I'm still alive. If it's a classic, I won't know anything about it.
Right, fair enough. Very, very practical, actually. Right. Between writing, traveling, and reading, if you were allowed to choose only one hobby, which one would it be and why? Writing, traveling, and reading. Sorry.
Well, I think I enjoy travelling. There's a slight get out of jail free card here because you said as a hobby. Well, I write for my work, you see, so I can still do my work. And I can go on holiday and then write about it, which is kind of what I do a lot anyway. So in that sense, I can get away with doing both under those terms.
Fantastic. Okay, now let's assume you were in charge of an educational institute and in charge of putting in curriculum, and you had to choose between Shakespeare, Oscar Wilde, and the Romantics. Which of these three, you will have to choose only one of them, which of these three would you rather students study?
I'd go for Oscar Wilde because just having seen some of the film adaptations, I think his stories are much more interesting, and I think his language might be more similar to modern prose, but I'm not sure because I don't tend to read the classics. They're hard work. What I have read I found to be hard work.
Yes, I usually go through this whenever I talk to my students about Shakespeare. Initially, at least in the first 2 classes, they roll up their eyes, but Gradually they are converted, but then initially they do roll up their eyes. You're right. It's largely the barrier is the language. Right. Now, if I had the tickets to a cricket match at the Lords, as well as tickets to a tennis match at Wimbledon, and I could give you only one set of tickets to any one of these events, which one would you pick and why?
Probably go to Lords because my husband likes cricket and I don't particularly care for either of them, so he'd be happy.
All right. Oh, so you don't care for either. Are you a football fan?
No, I don't really like sports. When the sports matches are on, we go out.
All right.
I think during big sports, big football matches and things, we've been to Madame Tussauds and big places that are normally crowded. We go there when everybody else is watching football.
That's clever, actually. Right. Now, between fiction and non-fiction, which one would you prefer to write?
Non-fiction, I think. I think I'm better at it.
Okay. Given the fact that I think you've authored about 8 to 9 books, isn't it? In non-fiction, you have about 8 to 9 to your name.
Yes.
Right. All right. Thank you so much for being the sport. We now will continue to talk and discuss your works and your writing process. Now, when and how did you start writing fiction?
Well, that was Pestilence. Really, was my first serious attempt at fiction, and I've still got the first draft that I wrote in sort of by hand when I was 16 years old in 1990, I think it must have been, and or at least that's when I started writing it. So it was a very long time ago. And I think work got in the way, and I couldn't figure out the ending, so that got shelved. And it was only in 2011, when I started writing as a freelance writer,
right,
that I decided to get this novel off the shelf, because I still felt the idea was good and some of the characters were good, and so I wanted to see which bits were good and get them typed up. So I did that, and then had spent National Novel Writing Month. I don't know if that's a thing in India, but it's your dedicated time to writing a book in November, and so I decided to spend that November trying to knock this book into shape. So having got all the best bits, typed up. I then decided to go through editing it, trying to get the ending put on because it didn't have an ending, and trying to sort out any problems that existed with it. And that was when I really had the first decent draft of what it has now turned into.
Right.
And then it kind of got shelved again because I got back to proper work. And I was still building a business, obviously, and I was doubling my income every year for the first 3 years. So I was really focused on the paying work, writing for magazines at that time. So it was really only sort of evenings, weekends, or during a really slow period that I couldn't seem to get any work in, when I'd get back to the book and do some more work on it, which meant the novel didn't really... It was always the last resort rather than the first priority. Right. And that's why it took another 10 years for it to get finished properly, because there were, still substantial problems with it.
Right.
And it went through a lot of edits over years, and it spent a lot of time not being looked at all. And then I eventually, in 2019, I took 2 months off work because I wanted to get this thing finished properly. So I took 2 months off to do a proper edit and get it all finished off. And then I spent 2020 trying to get a deal with agents, or pitching to agents trying to get a publishing deal.
Right.
And that didn't work. So at the turn of 2021, I decided to self-publish.
Right.
And here we are.
Fair enough. I think it's a blessing and it's a boon that authors can finally self-publish, and it makes such a huge difference.
Yes, well, it's nice to be able to get it out there without it incurring a lot of cost like it used to, and also to have the global platform of Amazon,
True.
To market it on. At the moment, sales are slow but steady. Hoping it might be discovered and take off, but
absolutely. Now, who are your favorite characters in this novel, or who is your favorite character?
Well, I think actually a lot of people, there's a character who really divides people, and his name is Alex. And in the original version, he was a psychopath, but he got toned down with various later edits. But anyway, he's a bad boy, and he's very much against the story. Sort of follows the plot of this deadly fungus, which becomes a pandemic, and it starts off with this miracle medicine. Right. And Alex's girlfriend wants to take part in the clinical trials for this miracle cure because she's got some health problems and she thinks this will fix it. And he doesn't want her to take part because he's an animal rights activist, and these drugs companies always test things on animals, so he hates them. And so you end up with this immediate conflict of her wanting to take part in these trials and him being against it. So you then end up with this bitter feud between the two of them. Well, she decides to go ahead anyway, and he's getting angry and moves off, and then comes back to get his revenge and things. But this character, he is, he does end up doing some bad stuff. He ends up in jail, and he ends up in a psychiatric institution. And he's sort of quite lively, and not. I don't know. He's not your normal run of the mill chap. And I suppose because he's lively and he's quite aggressive and he's complex, because he's also got these moral issues over animal welfare, he's kind of quite multi-dimensional, right? And that makes it interesting. And so
he did come across as a character who's extremely strong-willed and very confrontationalist. I read just the first few chapters, and that's how he comes across initially. I see a lot of clairvoyance there. I mean, you've written about this fungal infection, and then something that's really going to challenge the world, and then you're telling me that you conceived this in 2011. I thought maybe during the pandemic you really worked very hard and you got it out in a year, and this is amazing. So you're clairvoyant now.
No, I mean, the idea for a sort of a fungal infection that would, bring about the end of the world was something that I thought about when I was 16. So it's 30 years old, that original idea. It was based on the fact that I was a big fan of James Herbert, the horror writer, and his first book was about rats that took over London. And they'd kill people, and it was like this sort of deadly plague of rats. And then you had other horror writers that I admired at the time. Sean Hudson wrote about these slugs. And I wanted something kind of horrible that was going to have this catastrophic effect on society. And I just thought of this deadly fungus, and that was where it came from. And it was pure coincidence that by the time it was published, we were actually in a pandemic.
Absolutely.
It was really disappointing, actually, because I thought in 2020 that, I was thinking, gosh, I've got to get this out quickly, because I'm sitting on a pandemic novel, and we're in the middle of a pandemic. This is really topical, because at the time, Dean Koontz had the Wuhan virus novel that was selling really well, originally published in the 1980s, and there was the Lockdown novel by Peter May that was just released. And that had been doing really well. And I thought there was a big market for pandemic novels, and I was quite surprised and disappointed that agents didn't bite my arm off, to be honest. I want to take this novel and see the big market for it. But I suppose I later thought, well, I suppose those two people are famous, aren't they? There's my flaw.
Right. Right, and you never know what the literary agents are truly looking for. It's dicey. It's a little dicey.
No, and I've since come to the realisation that actually there's a lot of sort of apocalyptic and pandemic novels out there, and so it might have seemed very topical at the time, but it's by no means unique in the concept of the end of the world,
Right. Now, could I request you to read your favorite section from this novel? Do a short reading from your favorite section.
Oh, gosh, I don't know if I've got. Okay, right. Are we ready?
Yes.
Chapter 1: The ethical dilemma. This drug is our greatest achievement to date, said Dr. Lehman, research scientist. It kills everything: MRSA, drug-resistant tuberculosis, different strains of influenza. It might even help eradicate the common cold. He did a high five with his colleagues, grinning from ear to ear, and waved the papers in the air. This is going to transform medicine and put the company on the map. We can grow, expand, and do more good in the world. I'm so blimmin' excited. As they started to plan clinical trials, people with untreatable conditions were put forward by their clinicians, hoping for a cure. And among those who's selected to take part was Terry White, who'd been testing a topical application designed for difficult-to-treat skin complaints. This is a great opportunity, Terry explained nervously as she broached the subject with her partner, Alex. They think it could help me. I don't care. There's no way you're taking part in clinical trials for a new drug, he said. But nothing. They torture innocent animals for pure commercial gain. You know that. I'm desperate, Terry pleaded. The animal testing stage is over now. Me taking part won't change what's happened. I'm volunteering to be the lab rat. I'm taking the risk. No, you're not. Oh, please, Alex, try to understand. My contribution might mean the drug eventually helps people, and it might help me. I'm in so much pain. No way, he scowled. You're a hypocrite. Where's your conscience? I can't believe you want to be a part of that. His face reddened, hints of madness in his eyes. I spent a year in jail standing up to those barbarians. If you do this, we're finished, he declared unequivocally. This is the ugliest form of capitalism. It's totally sick. Tears welled up in Terry's eyes. I've been so ill for so long, her voice trailed off, choked with emotion. You haven't been here to see all the pain. No, I've been in jail for standing up to legalise murder. Then when I come out, you're ready to support the torture and murder of innocent animals for your own selfish gain. You're no better than the vivisectionists themselves. There you go. How's that? That's them having their first fight.
That's lovely, and it starts with a lot of action, lots of dialogue, right? And immediately we are introduced to the conflict.
Yeah, I'm not sure my Alex versus Terry was very good impressions.
Right. Thank you. Thanks for that. Now, besides the challenge of time, were there any other challenges that you particularly faced as a writer in writing a novel?
Well, I think with the novel, I should have planned it, because if I'd planned it from the start, it would have been done a hell of a lot more quickly. I would have worked out what the ending was before I even started writing the beginning, and then it wouldn't have sat on the shelf for 20 years and then on the computer for another 10 while I tried to figure out how the story was going to evolve. So I think if I did another novel, I would plan it from beginning to end, because I think that's a much better way of working. Because the other thing was, when I first started writing, I was doing, there were a lot of scenes that in the later editing stage I took out, and things that I changed, and that's just a lot of wasted time and energy writing out sort of huge sections that then get scrapped, and changing things and having to go through and check that it's all consistent. And if it was all consistent and planned at the start, I wouldn't have to do any of that. So it would be a lot more efficient way of working. And I think this, in a way, is why I prefer non-fiction, and I might get better at fiction actually with practice. But with non-fiction, you know what the story is. You don't have to work out these things. You don't have to go back and sort of take out huge chunks, or at least if you do, it's because they're not very good, or the story's too long and you're cutting. But it's not because you're changing the story, because you know what the story is.
Right.
So all you've got to do is put, with non-fiction, all you've got to do is put it across in the most compelling way possible. But with fiction, you've actually got to make it up, and you've got to do a good job of making it up, and you've got to make sure it's consistent and from beginning to end, and there aren't huge holes in it. And so, I think that's the challenge really with fiction. And the longer it is, the more scope there is for getting any part of that wrong. So again, if you're doing a short story, 1,000 words, I think it's much easier probably to do beginning to end and make sure there's no plot holes, than if you're doing a sort of 80,000 word novel, which has so many more other storylines and tangents and things that could go wrong if you're not concentrating, or if you take a break for too long. Because that's the other thing. When I was doing the editing, I had to try and kind of get through it quickly so that I could pick up on any inconsistencies from the beginning to the end. Because if you take, too long going over it, you might miss things, because you have to remember everything.
True. No, besides Pestilence, the other work that I completely was sold on to, I found it very charming, was your So Laced with Humour. It's this book, The Guinea Pigs Guide to Training Humans. Absolutely delightful.
That's my latest release.
And it's lovely. It's so brilliant. How did you think of this? The Guinea Pigs Guide to Training Humans. I mean, you've switched. So there's a little role reversal there. That's amazing.
Well, there's a series that's been hugely successful. It was published, I think, by Hodder and Stoughton, which is one of the big publishers. And it was published years ago, called 100 Ways for a Dog to Train Its Human, and it sold hundreds of thousands of copies. And then there was another one came out about 100 Ways for a Cat to Train Its Human, and then there was the chicken and the dog, and they had all these different versions of it. And they were, my understanding is that they all sold well, and they've sort of appeared in gift shops and things at tourist attractions and things in the UK. And so I was wanting to do a guinea pig one, and I was hoping to do it for the same publisher who could get me the distribution into these stores and things, but again, it's another trying to get your foot in the door problem. I couldn't even get the concept across to an agent to understand the concept. And the publishers won't talk to you unless you've got an agent. So I just think the guy Simon Whaley, who has written the dog one and sold about 250,000 copies of it, I think, sort of said, well, why don't you self-publish it? So anyway, I thought about this, and I sort of did a first draft about 5 years ago, and then sort of, looked at it again after a few years, after a break, and tweaked it, and wondered what to do with the pictures, because my own drawings aren't very good, and when you're self-publishing, you don't want to have to start investing in an illustrator, because suddenly things can get very expensive and you don't know whether you're going to sell it, whether it's going to sell or whether. So anyway, I worked out a way of turning some of my pictures of my own guinea pigs into sort of quirky little line drawings using a bit of software. So that's what I did. I sort of eventually ran through all the pictures through this bit of software and used different pictures of my own guinea pigs to illustrate the funny little anecdotes about guinea pigs training their humans all the way through the book. And I thought it worked quite well, but I wasn't sure. So then it sat on the computer for another few years. And then just recently, because of lockdown slowing down the market for magazine writing work, I decided to sort out this book. And I sent it off to a guinea pig owner to ask her what she thought and say be brutal, because if it's rubbish, I want to know. And she sort of really liked it. She said there were a couple of things that may be a bit too close for comfort about guinea pigs getting ill. So I took those out. But then she sort of suggested a few other things that might enhance it as well, and I put those in. So it's had another little sort of few tweaks. And then I published it literally about, I think it was about a week ago. Might have been a bit longer.
That's your most recent book.
Not very long ago.
Yeah,
it's been getting sort of quite a lot of Kindle Unlimited reads. Sold a few copies. not hundreds flying off the virtual shelves, but people are downloading it on Kindle Unlimited. So basically, as long as people are reading it, I'm happy. I don't care how they're reading it.
Right, as long as the books are being read. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, very interestingly, you've also designed the cover for the books, isn't it? Both for the Guinea Pigs Guide as well as Pestilence. How did you manage to do that?
Well, this was one of the up points of ending up working in marketing for years, was that I had this graphics design package, and because we were in a marketing office at a college, which had a very small budget, we had to design our own adverts and things. So I got to play around with graphic design packages and design some of the corporate literature and brochures and things, like design the newsletters and the adverts and the annual report. I do a lot of the design work in the college. So from that, I learnt how to use graphics software. And so I've just got some installed on my computer, and I'm not an expert, but I can knock together a decent cover that I think is better than your average Amazon templates. So that's what I do for my covers. I think, to be honest, I think they're better than some of the ones that the people commission as well. But it depends. They're very mixed, aren't they, covers in self-publishing?
True. Now, given that you're a prolific writer with what, close to, or rather a little over 10 books under your belt now, both fiction and non-fiction, and then besides this, you've had a degree in marketing, psychology, diet and nutrition. Now, how do all these diverse interests impact your writing?
Well, the things I can write about, obviously on the nutrition side, I started off doing a lot on nutrition. I was pitching nutrition stories to the most sort of strange magazines, not necessarily health magazines, but sort of, I did a nutrition story for a teaching magazine, for example. Right. Trade magazines and things. I was trying to offer something sort of, like I say, I couldn't really write with any authority about teaching because, I'd worked in colleges, but I was no teacher. But I knew a bit about nutrition, so I could write about nutrition for keeping you alert during the working day, knowing the challenges that some of the teachers I've been working with face in terms of being run off their feet and having very demanding days, and how to make nutrition work for you. So I was, in that sort of environment. So I was doing that and writing sometimes for the occasional business magazine or something on nutrition. And then that was the angle that got me into the gardening magazines, because I don't know a flower from a weed. I'm no gardener, but the gardening magazines would give me jobs writing about the vegetables that they grew and how the nutritional benefits of eating homegrown veg and what the different vegetables contained and how that could reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease or other common health complaints. So that was how I used the nutrition. The psychology degree was sort of years earlier, and I had aspirations at the time that maybe I'd get into sort of being a therapist or something, but that didn't really work out. But it's it's still useful to have learned some of the stuff just about human nature and psychology, and it looks good when I'm pitching sort of mental health ideas and that kind of thing. I've got that kind of background and basic knowledge when I'm writing about well-being, sort of mental health and well-being articles. And it makes me look like I know what I'm talking about as well.
Right.
So that's a bonus.
Right. Now, very, very interestingly for your book, Pagan Journeys, when I was reading up about you, I read that you have even met and interviewed Druids. I think after
Yes.
that, my only reference point to Druids is asterisks, get a fix. No, how was it? How was your experience meeting Druids? And,
well, it's quite interesting. I had trouble getting, I was, as I say, I was pitching to all sorts of different magazines, and one of them I was pitching to at the start was a spiritual magazine, who said, the editor said, well, if you can get me an interview with Druids, you can have the job. So, at this stage, I was up for anything because I was still building the business. And so, right, okay, I'm going to get you an interview with Druids. So I was going online, I was trying to find Druids who would talk to me, and Druids really didn't want to talk because they're quite private.
right.
And I think they also feel that they might be open to sort of ridicule and things sometimes. And I think also some of them are writers. So if they want to, be in a piece of writing, they'll do it themselves. Right. Because they're sort of often creative types. Anyway, after much sort of toing and froing, trying to secure interviews with Druids who didn't want to be interviewed, I eventually found one who did, and two in fact. There were two from the same sort of Druid grove in Devon who both agreed to be interviewed for this article. And I sorted that out with them, and they sent me photos, and I did the interview over the phone and liaised with the magazine who went back and forth with them about these interviews. And then I've done some other things with them as well. And because I was quite interested in the whole thing, I contacted a local group of Druids and decided it would be interesting to go to one of their ceremonies. So I went to their winter solstice ceremony in local woodlands, and it was a bit strange. I felt quite sort of self-conscious, I think, to start with, because we rolled up in this car park near local woodlands, and they all came out dressed in their robes, looking like something from medieval England. It was very, very eccentric, and I felt a bit embarrassed. But anyway, so I just went along with it, and we went along, and they were calling to the spirits of various earth spirits and wind spirits, and this ceremony, it just went on and on. It went on for about 3 hours, and
did you get to see any prayers?
Sorry,
did you get to see any of the spirits?
No, you couldn't see them.
You were only with spirits.
You had to imagine. And they were sort of all saying, like, going around the group saying individual sort of prayers to the spirits, and they had sort of these food offerings which they would give, and then say chants, and they'd do chanting and sort of movements and things. It was all very strange. It did go on for a long time, but didn't go on for so long I was bored particularly, but it was quite an interesting thing to do. But I haven't done it again.
A unique experience, isn't it? It's definitely a unique experience.
Yeah, so that's it. That's the thing, I suppose. Writing and being told, right, we want interviews with this person, and it does. You end up doing all sorts of things. I did sort of indoor skydiving for an article to say what it was like. And that Druid ceremony, I wrote an article about it for the New Humanist, which is an anti-religious magazine, with a bit of a sort of humorous take on the whole experience. But unfortunately, they didn't decide to print that one in the end. But I think I might have put it in the book. I can't remember now.
Right. Right. Now, who's your most trusted critic? Whose suggestion do you rely on?
Well, there's a man called Dave Sivers. He's in my writers group, and he's self-published his novels, and he's sold tens of thousands of copies. So he's hugely successful, and he does it all himself. And I find that, so I trust his judgment in terms of, is my stuff any good? Because particularly on fiction, which is an area he's obviously much more practiced at than I am, and he's achieved a lot more than I have in fiction because of the success of his sales. So I've asked him, when I want someone to. He was the one who first read my book, and I said, "Is it okay? Are there any problems with it? Can you tell me what you think of it?" And so he gave me feedback and a few suggestions before I published Pestilence.
What has been
he's my go-to person for that kind of thing.
Right. Now, what has been the best compliment so far? Something that has stayed with you?
Oh, well, it's this lady who I used to go to school with her, and I connected with her on Facebook, but I don't really know her very well. I mean, I haven't seen her for 30 years. And she bought a copy of Pestilence, and her daughter got all excited about it and wanted to read it as a bedtime story. So they've been reading one chapter as a bedtime story every night. And this little girl is 10 years old, and apparently the little girl loves it.
Amazing.
So, I mean, it's not written for children, but to me, because the little girl doesn't know me and has no preconceptions about me, so she's not primed to like it or to be nice or anything.
Absolutely.
But the fact that she does like it, even though it's not written for her, for her age group, is a real compliment. So yeah, I mean, the only thing that sort of struck me about that is I think it's got three swear words in it, which if I'd known 10-year-olds were going to be reading it, I wouldn't have put in.
Right.
It was during a lively argument.
That's lovely actually. The fact that a 10-year-old is loving you.
So I think that's my biggest compliment. Yeah.
What is the best thing about living in the UK, and how has this seeped into your writing?
Best thing about living in the UK. Well, I think at the moment, the fact that we seem to be the only country that's got a vaccination program that works.
Yeah, going great guns, right? I think nearly 70% of the population is vaccinated, or perhaps more.
Yes. I think that's the good side. We've got ourselves very well organised in a way that perhaps we didn't have at the start of the pandemic. In terms of writing, I think I'm not sure if being in the UK has been a good thing, particularly because we have a very kind of conservative culture where you have expectations of what you're supposed to do. Actually, you probably have this bit in India as well. And, doing something that's maybe a little bit out there, like being something unusual, like, I think I'll be an actress, or I think I'll be a writer,
Right.
It's frowned upon.
It's frowned upon.
This is why I wasn't allowed when I was young, because while I was living under my parents' roof, I had to do something that they thought was appropriate, which, was at the time the only thing I could get was admin work, and it was a sort of government apprenticeship thing, which was slave labour. So I couldn't even. I was working full time, and I couldn't even afford to get away from under their roof because there was no money. So that was kind of a bone of contention. And it was a bone of contention that kind of continued for a while. But now, but that's part of the British culture. You see that a lot of people expect you to conform to what most people do, and what most people do is go and get an office job. They think being a writer or being an actress or being something in the arts is silly and ill-advised, and you can't actually make a living. I mean, my dad said I was too young, and that, I think they think you need job security and things. And of course, the thing is, the frustrating thing is, when I was at home, I didn't particularly need job security, not in the way you do once you've got a mortgage. Right. And then, of course, once you've got a mortgage, then you've got to stick with your proper job because you've got to pay the mortgage. So in a way, trying to build up a writing business when you don't have all of those commitments would have been perfect. So I mean, I suppose, the UK has its upsides and its downsides.
Fair enough.
I like our countryside.
What are you planning next? What is your next upcoming set of works?
Well, at the moment, I'm dabbling with Medium, which is a sort of online writing platform where you put articles and blogs up, and you can offer them to publications on Medium, which gives them a wider reach. And people sign up to Medium. They pay £5 a month to be able to read unlimited articles. So then when they read your article, someone who's paid, that is, you get a small amount of money to be, royalty for the reading of your article. So this is a way of making money from articles that have, that maybe I've written in the past, some of which have been published and some of which haven't. And some of the sort of Medium publications which can get greater visibility to your work, they won't accept stuff that's been published before, but some of them will. And of course, there's always the option to not publish through a publication. You can just publish on your own page because you have your own page as well. So what I'm doing at the moment, very early days, is exploring that as an option, because I've got thousands of articles that I've written, most of which have been published and some of which haven't, that I could monetize by putting them onto Medium and getting paid when people view them. So, so that's my current sort of what I'm investigating at the moment.
All right. Any special message for viewers of the Writer Talks?
Oh, well, keep writing, I suppose. That's how you succeed in the end. You don't give up.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. I really love the way you mentioned your email ID on your website. Rather than the usual .com, you've actually gone ahead and spelled it out and put in the letters. It's very unique.
Oh, well, that is because sometimes I think there's these spider things that go around on websites and pick up people's emails and then put them on mailing lists.
Oh, right.
And I want to try and not get spam to my mailbox. So it's a way of not putting it on the internet so that it doesn't end up automatically added to spam lists. That's why I don't put it.
Oh, that's clever. That's clever. Now that's something I learned. I didn't know that. So thank you so much for being on the Writer Talks, and really appreciate your time, your patience, and it's so fantastic speaking about all your works. All the best to your upcoming ventures as well.
Thank you.
Hope to have you back on the Writer Talks soon. Take care.
Okay, thank you very much. Bye.